and the show recording begins right now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Transformations with Carly and Rick. Straight talk about life, business, and spirituality. Hi, everyone. I'm Rick, and right next to me is Carly. And we are transmitting, actually not live today. We're recording, but we are live too. And this is Transformations. How are you doing today, Carly?
I'm doing wonderful, and I'm really excited to have Corey Jahnke with us today. And what I love about him is, well, several things. One is he's a certified go-giver coach, which, as you and I both love Bob Berg and all of his teachings. And he's also someone that has a unique life because he actually is a pharmacist in one part of his life, and yet in the other part of his life, he's actually a coach, and he teaches a lot about leadership and high performance. And he's also an author of We Are Not Here on Rehearsal and Release Your Inner Genie. And Corey, please say your name so I know I didn't do the pronunciation quite exactly correct in your last name. So I'd love everyone to hear your voice and how you pronounce your last name.
Well, thank you, Carly. My name is Corey Jahnke, and I'm from northern Wisconsin.
And I'm really happy to have you here. One of the things that you and I have talked on the phone about is I'd really like to discuss your last blog post. And so can you share the title of that and a little bit of why you chose to write that? And then I'm going to kind of tie some pieces in with that.
Well, the one I wrote today is called Calling Someone an Idiot is Not Good Leadership. And one of the things that's really funny about it is that people think that you can call somebody something by the words that you actually say. The blog post is about somebody who was calling all of his employees an idiot, had no idea he was doing it, but he was doing it through nonverbal communication.
And so one of the things I actually love, one of my terminologies that I love is called compassionate, passionate communications. And a lot of people think like that term is very woo-woo or very frou-frou, and that people in a leadership position can't be firm yet also have a heart or have compassion. It's kind of like me and Rick did an episode called Is It Criticism or Is It Feedback? I think all of us in an opportunity have the choice when someone's telling us something, whether to take or being given as a criticism or take something and grow with that. And that ties into your other blog post we'll talk about. However, tying into the one that you just mentioned, going back to the wording, I think a lot of times we take the terminology of free speech and think we can just say and do whatever we want and not realize how we treat people and what we say and what we do impacts people and creates a very different kind of ripple effect than one would think. What do you think about that, Corey?
Well, it's exactly true because leadership is really important to understand that people are watching everything you do. I'll give you for instance. My dogs know what day I'm going to work, and they know when I'm getting ready to go for a walk, and they know when they should get excited and when they don't get excited. What I mean is I put a certain pair of shoes on, they start jumping up and down. Oh, cool, he's going for a walk, he'll probably take us, and they get all wild. Well, everybody is the same way. Our employees and our friends and our family, they're always watching us for what we call cues to see, what kind of moods we're in, how we're going to treat them, and what our day is going to be like. And I think a lot of people in leadership positions think that just because they're the boss, they can have all kinds of power and authority. But really what people are watching is what does this person actually represent in their actions and not so much in what they say. So people spend a lot of time trying to learn the right words to say, but their actions don't necessarily mimic their words. And I'll give you, for instance, there was a guy in our company who was really big on sending out all of these inspirational quotes, like once a day, and he could send it out to probably 5,000 emails at a time. Well, one of the store employees came up to me because she saw that I had commented on his quote, and she said, well, you know that's all a bunch of garbage, don't you? And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, I was standing in the store, and he walked right by me. What kind of a leader is that, she said. And I thought that was really amazing because, this guy has no idea that people are watching him so hard. And I think as leaders, that's a big responsibility. So we need really what John Maxwell would call walk our talk.
That's a good point. Now, in his defense, I don't know who the guy is. I've been accused of that. The same exact thing. I'll walk by somebody and I don't really notice them. And it's not that I'm not paying it. I don't see well. And it's funny. If I stop, I'll see them. If I don't, I may bump into them. I may actually not see them well. And sometimes people think, oh, isn't he being rude? And I have to actually force myself to slow it down a little bit because I may see somebody who I don't recognize right away. It's that bad eyesight thing. And I think Carly may have gone through some of the same things from time to time. But there's a lot who are just kind of jerky out there who honestly don't care, or they'll notice you when they need something.
Sure, and I'm not necessarily saying anything remotely related to that he's a bad guy.
Right.
What I'm saying is he was perceived by that employee as being a bad guy. Fair or not, it's still the way she saw them. And
sure.
And the point being, as a leader, you need to do everything you can to understand that you are presenting a picture. Just much like when you put together this video, you've got certain things that you wanted to include. Mm-hmm. And when you're presenting yourself as a leader, you should take into account all of the things you want to include.
Yeah.
And he's bringing up a valid point. I know there's a lot of leaders. I mean, Richard Branson actually talked about this. He's actually blogs about his assistants. Someone that's a true leader that has an assistant, that assistant will constantly cue him in to, you need to know these specific employees. A true leader of a company needs to know all the names of their employees. They need to know by facial recognition. And it's more of, like, even though Rick and I may have bad eyesight, I can see where he's coming from. The fact that if you are in that position, you yourself have to stop, breathe, and pay attention to the environment that you're in to stop and pay attention because you are leading through example. Tying into that, and I told Rick this story before. I was at a seminar once, and I was doing the back end for the seminar. So I was dealing with the speakers and what have you. And this one particular speaker gets on stage, and he's like, okay, do not eat when you drink, because if you drink when you eat, you dilute your digestive enzymes. But then we go to lunch, and mind you, people pay thousands of dollars for this course, and we're all sitting around tables. Now, participants are sitting in other round tables, like maybe one or two tables away from the speaker's table. So we're sitting at the speaker's table, and people can see what he's doing. And what do you think he does? The first thing he does is he actually drinks with his meal. So, everyone can see that. So I think what Corey's pointing out is that just if you are in that position of leadership, we have the responsibility. If we choose that, in other words, if we choose to take the position of being a leader, we have a responsibility to be more acutely aware of our surroundings and also how we present ourselves and how we interact with people.
Well, all he really had to do was say, don't drink when you eat, but it depends. Then it would have been more honest.
Well, the premise was, if you look at nutrition, is you can drink before you eat or after you eat. But if you drink while you're eating, you actually dilute the digestive enzymes.
Right.
And he was actually, saying that in the course, and it was an actual wellness course. So it actually was a big impact when he did that.
Yeah. Now, Corey.
Yes, sir.
You've been through the Go Giver program. How was that experience?
Well, it is an amazing, amazing experience because I'll tell you what was the best thing about it. I went to one of Bob Berg's seminars, and all of the Go Giver coaches were there, and these are people that actually do walk their talk. They live what they believe. When they had the speakers, the Go Giver coaches were all over the speakers, making sure they had everything they needed. When there was the attendees, the Go Giver coaches were all over the attendees, making sure everything that was where they wanted to be. And it's really, really empowering for me, coming from a small town in northern Wisconsin, to see that there are other people out there who really get the concept that, you know what, if you go ahead and act in the other person's best interest for the sake of acting in the other person's best interest, that really does work. And I'll give you, for instance, a lot of times as a pharmacist, a customer will come in and they'll say, Corey, my name is Joe so-and-so, and I wanted to let you know that my mom finally passed away last week. But I wanted you to know, she just thought ... about you, and I really wanted you to know that I appreciate that. Well, I have a partner. He asked me, he said, well, how come that never happens for me? And, getting back to Carly's feedback, how mean do you want to be? But I said, the difference is that when you act nice towards a customer, there's a perception there that you're doing it because you want something in return. And the Go-Giver program teaches you that you have to disassociate yourself from the outcome and just trust in that if you do the right thing, good things will happen to you.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. We had an experience, about 11 years ago, where we got called to do a favor for another company, and this happened to be a huge company. We didn't think about that. It was just one of those moments. This is right out of a Bob Burke book. I mean, when I read his book, I was going, I lived that. I actually went through that experience. No thought at the time of what we were doing. Somebody asked us to do a favor. So we did a favor, about 3 hours of work. They said, how much would it cost? I said, nothing. I mean, just a favor. Don't worry about it. And then that turned into probably quite a few million in contracts later. And I was going, oh my gosh. And it wasn't expected. We didn't even want, I mean, not that we didn't want it, but it was not expected. I mean, it was strictly a favor. Fix one thing. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. We did a favor to someone else. And that's, when I read the Go-Giver book, I went, that it works. It does. I mean, boy, and it works beautifully, because when you expect nothing, it's amazing what sometimes good stuff comes out of it, because you're just doing it because that's your philosophy, or that's how you feel. You help customers.
Right.
And, I imagine you as a pharmacist, when you get people, and you as a pharmacist, you've probably seen this. There's a lot of pharmacies that deal with sick people. They're dealing with unhappy people. And it's hard to sometimes turn that attitude around. But when you do, they do appreciate it.
Well, that's the thing. You just don't get to know who and when, but you know that it will always eventually pay off. And one of the things that I've been blessed with is I've been a pharmacist in the same town for 22 years. So I've watched people go from 20 to 45. I've watched people go from prenatal vitamins to 20. And what happens is that when things go wrong, people know who to go to. And if you get to be that person, the benefit that you get that most people just don't really comprehend is that you're living in this state of abundance. You're living in this constant state of happiness, because you know that your happiness and well-being is not tied to any specific financial goal. Your state of well-being and your happiness is not tied to any specific, hey, you're a great guy. And I'll give you an example of how that pays off. Like one day I had this, I'll never forget this. She was the nicest girl. She comes in and she's just bawling her head off. And I said, well, what happened? And she said, well, I need this antibiotic. I'm really, really sick. I'm on Medicaid. And the copay is supposed to be $1. I don't have $1. And the last pharmacist treated me like crap and he shooed me out the door. And I said, I'll tell you what. Let me get you your antibiotic. I was working for Kmart at the time. I said, Kmart, I'll eat that $1. Don't you worry about it. And, I just did what I normally do, explained to her all about the medicine, and I let her know she could call me the next day. Well, what was really interesting is the very next day, in walks this woman who looks like her, but is about 25 years older. She brings her mom. Her mom has this brown bag sack that has almost 20 bottles in it. Her mom takes almost 20 medicines, transferred all of her medicines from the pharmacy the girl was at over to Kmart. Now, I couldn't have seen that coming. I had no idea. And I'm not trying to blow my own horn, but I'm just trying to share that is the way it works. Yeah. When you stay unattached to the results, good things happen.
And I would bet that you have a really big extended family where you work.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and it's nice, isn't it?
Well, it really is. And one of the things, for instance, I walked into the local Hardee's. I don't know if you have Hardee's in California, but it's essentially like a McDonald's or a Jack in the Box. And this particular Hardee's where my store is has a bunch of coffee cups hanging on the wall. So people will go in there and they will sit for literally hours and drink coffee. And one day I walk in there and there's about 15 of my customers sitting together. And the interesting thing is they're all on Medicaid, they're all on a lot of medicines, they're all relatively disabled, but they're all traveling like this pack. And I didn't know they even knew each other, and some of them are brothers to each other, some of them are cousins. And so, when I walked in, they're all like, hey, Cor, come on, sit down with us, and everything else like that. Well, what would that have been like had the word been the opposite? Because we have people around that treat people poorly just because they're on Medicaid or disability, which, is a whole other topic.
Right.
But how would that have been for me if I walked in and they're all like, that's the guy that treats us like dirt?
Yeah, you'd be hearing some murmuring and probably feeling a little funny.
Well,
right.
And this is a really important piece of why people don't get what Corey's even saying is so important. And we were talking about, and Rick and I talked about this with social media. People don't realize that social media, especially with Foursquare, so I was going to get labs the other day, and I go to the same place to get labs every single time. And now Foursquare, people leave tips. They actually will say, this pharmacist is a really nice person. This person is, well, someone actually wrote in a tip on this particular lab that I go to that said, this receptionist is really mean. And I almost wanted to show it to her, but the funny thing is she's not with me because I know how to engage her. And I know she's cranky, and I know she's moody. Every time I go have my blood drawn, I always go and say, hey, how are you doing? What are you doing today? What have you been doing the past week? I engage her to take her out of that cranky mood. However, with social media nowadays, if Corey had been mean to a customer at Walmart or wherever for right now you're at Walmart as a pharmacist, right? So if someone had checked in at Walmart and they put a tip on saying Corey is an amazing guy versus Corey doesn't even talk to you and he's mean, people do not realize that everything we do nowadays shows up somewhere, whether we know it or not. That lady will never know that comments on that Foursquare. And I actually have been, especially since Corey put that last article about, which I do want to address, Corey, that article about the boss. So I want you to actually say that title, because this is exactly like this Foursquare tip. I have the choice now, because I've gone to a lot of other people and brought them comments when I've seen things. And I've taken a lot of heat for it, and it's okay, because I felt I had the integrity and authenticity. For me, my own values, I needed to do it. And I've been dancing with this one a little bit because she is really, really cranky. And there is now in the internet world, on Foursquare, there's a comment about her that pretty much says she's a nasty person. And so I'd really love for you to address the last title of your blog, not the one you just released, but the one before that.
Sure, that was called, so I said to my boss, I'll help you as soon as you start meeting my expectations.
Now, how many people do we know or think are willing to stand up to the plate, fearing that possibly they could lose their job and actually say something?
Well, and that's something that you and I kind of kicked back and forth on Facebook. And I said, look, what kind of a person am I if I let your career suffer because I don't have the guts to show you where you're struggling? And that particular post was about how my boss came to me and said, you've got 10 times more influence in my own market than I do, and I'm supposed to be your district manager. I need you to endorse me. And I said, basically, I can't endorse you until you start living up to my expectations, or I'm going to lose credibility with your market. But here's how you can start building up your own influence. And what kind of a person would I be if I let her fail? I talk to a lot of managers who say, well, I don't like to do evaluations because, what if I have to give somebody constructive criticism? Or I don't necessarily want to be a manager because what if I have to tell somebody that they're doing something wrong? And it's not about right or wrong. It's about, okay, your career has a path. And if you want somebody's path to go up, you've got to be able to stand in and step up and say, okay, it's time for you to consider approaching it this way.
Yeah, that's true. And I always find it interesting when people leave companies, they usually leave many times with this really aggressive insult the person they didn't like, but they didn't do it while they were there, and they didn't help while they were there. So to me, that's kind of a cowardly way out. You're not helping anybody, you're just being mean. And in the long run, probably that person's the one who doesn't look that good.
Well, right. And when it comes to, say, an employee who, isn't meeting expectations, is it really the right thing to do to just say, well, Carly, goodbye? And Carly's like, what? Or is it the right thing to say, Carly, here's the expectations for my pharmacy. What I'm looking for, the very first day that you get here, I sit you down and I say, the number one thing I need you to do is treat your customers like they're your family. And I lay out some pretty specific but very easy expectations, and I say things like, look, you don't get paid to get yelled at by customers. And if a customer starts getting huffy with you, you bring them to me and we'll take care of that. But this is what you do get paid for. And we go through that. And then if you aren't living up to that, then we sit down and we say, okay, Carly, here's the thing. You're not meeting these expectations, and this is what I need you to do to meet these expectations. There doesn't have to be nasty or angry, but if you do that enough times and Carly can't get that done, then in effect, Carly has fired herself. You didn't fire her, but at the same time, you gave her every chance to succeed.
Yep.
And I think that's critical.
I was just thinking of something. I had a doctor. He retired now, and we really miss him a lot. He called himself a country doctor, and he really was. He spent time with you. He knew every patient really well, and he considered patients part of his family. And we actually, we were there for 20 years with him, or 24 years, and it was always like, Dr. Phelps is this great guy, and he was more like family. Everybody liked him that way, and it's interesting because sometimes, like, our daughter would go in or something, and he'd hold her by the hand and go, "You feeling better?" And she would go, "Uh-huh." And he says, "I'm going to give you some medicine to help with what you've got." And he would hold her hand. And she felt better from the touch. And I was just thinking, as you were talking about that, how with so many HR laws and so many of this, what if you have a patient, sometimes all they need is just a touch. And all of a sudden, wow, what a difference. That little human touch. Instead, we have to treat everybody like lepers because of corporate America. You can't do this. No, I can't touch you. That would be evil. But think of what sometimes that one touch just on the hand, I hope you feel better. Give me a call. Wow, that would be priceless. And yet we're not allowed to in so many cases.
It's the same thing with hugs.
Yes,
same
imagine
thing. If a doctor was able to just hug you and go, I understand you're going through a challenging time. And so there's so many facets to this. And on the one problem, we have the society has created this insanity of just, suing for nothing. And then we have the other side of the culture of just people that are, I will call more the spiritual-oriented people that some people will call woo-woo, and they're all about hugs and love, and then you got, it's kind of like our society is so black and white, and it's so yes or no. It's it's so lopsided in that way, and it's a shame because there are so many simple tools like a hug. Now, the funny thing with hugs, though, too, is, and I'll bring this up. This is it's an unconscious thing and also a neurolinguistic thing. Is most people know that if someone is crying and you instantly hug them, you actually are doing a disservice, because when children are crying or someone, even an adult is crying, you're actually processing something. So So the tool to that would be to basically in that moment, obviously acknowledge what someone's going through and say, more than happy to hear you or talk about it, and then hug them. But if you hug them in the moment of them crying, you are actually pulling them away from feeling or processing what they're feeling. So there's a very interesting things when you get into also helping in psychiatry and counseling and hugging. And
you're stopping the catharsis.
What?
You're stopping the catharsis.
Yes, exactly. And so I always, a lot of people say, "Oh, you're so cold." Why, and I used to work for hospice, and these are the things I'd have to teach my patients as well, and the families. It's like, yes, hold their hands. Yes, rub their feet. Yes, stroke their arms. However, there's this kind of delicate balance of not over-hugging, allowing the person to transition. Because if you're actually holding on to them really tightly, even though you're telling them that they can go and it's okay, they're still feeling the energy, your energy, and they can feel your fear. And so they actually hang on longer.
If you go to an old person's home, let's say whether it's assisted care or a board and care or a nursing home, one of the things that's probably the most lacking is a touch. And again, we go back to that kind of leper thing where they're old and they don't look good, they maybe don't smell that good, and people just kind of stay away. And then you watch the nurses or the caregivers, the best ones know how to gently touch, and they guide, and they're the ones who the people say, they make me feel human, they make me feel good.
Oh, that's such a good point. Because what you're really talking about is connecting.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I think the big thing that when we feel that pressure to not maybe physically touch, there's a great way to emotionally touch, and it's called listening. It's called listening while looking someone right in the eyes.
Yeah.
There's a really important blog post today. Somebody wrote about, eye contact being a thing of the past.
Now, when you did the Go-Giver training, what was the most telling thing for you? Something that you probably knew but was different, that you approached life and maybe your job and everything else just a little bit differently?
Well, I think that maybe this would be a great time to talk about Bob Berg, because Bob Berg is the guy that really runs the Go-Giver coaching program. And how I met Bob is I'm actually also a John C. Maxwell certified coach. And Bob was a guest speaker for one of our John Maxwell conference calls. And I thought that, Bob was just amazing in the way that he talked about, the Go-Giver approach to business and so forth. And it was really cool for me because I went ahead and was doing, like you said, seemed like something I'd been doing my whole life. But then I tried to add a little more consciousness to that. And it was working out really, really well at work. It's one thing to be giving like a 3.5 to 4-star effort to your customer service and your patients. But when you listen to a guy like Bob talk and you get a 5-star effort, it all of a sudden just really zooms. And so what I did is I Facebook messaged him because I didn't know any other way to get a hold of him, and said, hey, I was trying what you were talking about, and it was just working like gangbusters. And he did something really interesting. He responded within like 20 minutes. And then I said a comment, and here we get into this conversation. And then all of a sudden, he helps me write a blog post. So my point is that here's a guy that's not only teaching it, he's out there living it. And it was very, very fascinating. And so the part that really works well with Bob is to listen to Bob go through the Go-Giver book and through the 5 laws and really show you real-life examples and really teach you, just how it fits in. And then to see him walk his own talk and to see him actually live that, I think it's just a fascinating thing. And even to this day, if Bob sees something that you're doing that he likes, he lets you know. But at the same time, back to Carly's thing about feedback, if Bob sees something he doesn't like about what you're doing, he will also let you know. Very discreetly, very tactfully, hey, I'm just throwing this out there for you, but I think you need to know type thing. And you can't ask for much more than that.
I've heard that time and time. I mean, my knowledge of Bob goes all the way back to before, actually, I think it was 2004. And actually, I think it was at a T. Harv Eker, one of the events I was facilitating. But anyways, and I've read all his books, and it's just, he really does. He is a type of man I hear, and I've interviewed, obviously, several people that are Go-Giver certification certified with the Go-Giver program, and I hear that time and time and time again. And even people that are not even at all certified with Go-Giver program, when anybody inboxes Bob or tweets Bob, he is somebody that does walk his talk. He will respond. Not a lot of speakers will do that. They'll have a virtual assistant team doing it. They'll have a social media PR team doing it. And I always teach my clients when I do consulting and PR or marketing or social media that, you have to have some hands-on. You don't have to be exactly Bob Berg model and actually do everything yourself, because some people just can't. They have a really large business, or they're traveling all the time. However, even if you hire a team or you have someone that's actually handling that, you need to be exactly hands-on and telling them which people you directly are going to contact, what exactly they're allowed to say or post. And he's very good at giving people feedback. And like you said, it could be feedback that maybe, and some people might take as wrong feedback, or not wrong, but bad feedback, or good feedback. And that goes back to my same conversation with Rick is it criticism or is it feedback? Because to me, any feedback, there's no right or wrong, good or bad, is something that I can choose to then take and excel with, change or shift something to improve what I'm doing, or I can take it and call the person an idiot, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they're bad. And let my little wounded ego or inner child have a little tantrum, if you will. Because that's what it boils down to. When we react to other people, we're having a tantrum. Mm-hmm. We're having an inner tantrum. So it's a choice point. What are you going to choose to do with it? Accept it, or, basically have a fit about it?
Well, we are right about at the end of our time. And, Corey, we'd love to have you back on. Talk a little bit. I think we just touched the tip of the iceberg today, and you notice this is one of those subjects that's everybody passionate.
It does. It's because there's so many things. I want to end this, though, with like 3 key points. So, Corey, what are 3 key points you want people to walk away with?
Well, the first one is that go-giver point that, do what you do out of a spirit of abundance. Try really hard to not attach yourself to the result of your actions. That would be one. The second one would be really take a look, ask some people who you trust at your nonverbal cues. How do I show up? Am I somebody that people think is genuine, or am I somebody that people think is just putting on a show via email? And of course, number 3, listen attentively and make eye contact.
Yeah.
And that's all. Everything you said is so important. Just so everybody knows that's listening or watching the video, there will be all of Corey's and I'm sure Rick has been showing the slide. However, it'll be in a post with all the links so you can contact Corey, as well as the back of the video. There will be plenty of ways to find anything you want to know about Corey. And Corey, thank you so much for joining us. I am really honored to have you with us, and I look forward to talking to you again.
And likewise.
Oh, I appreciate it very much.
Likewise, this is fun.
You can say that again.
Well, for all you people watching the show, please subscribe, give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you, and feel free to contact us. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Corey, Carly.